What is up, everybody? I'm AJ, and welcome to the new setup for the show. We're here to talk about UFC Vegas 26, headlined by Michelle Waterson, the Karate Hottie, and Marina Rodriguez. And yeah, before we get down to business, I'd like to let you guys know, as always, about PrizePicks. PrizePicks is the most straightforward fantasy game in the industry. Use promo code AJ100 for up to 100% instant deposit bonus on a $100 deposit. It is just you versus a projection. There's no sharks. There's no fish, excuse me. And it is simple as that. So PrizePicks, check it out. They added MMA. You guys will get my UFC picks if you subscribe to the mailing list on my website, www.ajmmabetting.com, for free. I'll give you guys a few different selections that I like that catch my eye on PrizePicks. So again, prizepicks.com, promo code AJ100 for up to 100% instant deposit bonus. And they are the only DFS site that does that, by the way, as of right now. 100% instant deposit bonus for up to $100. The other thing I'd like to let you guys know about is Daily Fan MMA. I contribute to Daily Fan MMA for Bellator and UFC content. I have multiple bets up right now for Bellator and UFC this weekend. And you'll get my analysis for the bets, why I placed it, and of course the analysis. But then you also get everything else that's included in Daily Fan MMA. There's an abundance of DFS content, just matchup breakdown, just everything you could get all in one site. There's even merch as well. So dailyfanmma.com. Really encourage you guys to check it out. And that is where I'm, selling my betting services right now. So we're here to talk about this event. It's a 12-fight card. And, I got to say, it's a pretty stellar fight night card, to be honest with you. I know that next week people are maybe going to compare it more to the tremendous pay-per-view that we have Saturday, but I'm really excited for this event, to be honest with you. I think there could be a lot of finishes here. The odds suggest that as well. And those are just kind of my general thoughts. I have one play up right now. I'm looking to add maybe one or two more, just waiting for the props to get released on the book that I use. Shout out to DraftKings Sportsbook. But yeah, just going to play it patient, just, see what happens. It's only Wednesday, and let's let it ride, right? So first fight of the night, we got Christian Aguilera taking on Carlton Harrison. How I'm going to do this, guys, is it's going to be a screen share. Obviously, you guys are seeing the big screen right here, but I actually have my notes pulled up on my other screen. So I'm going to be looking at the notes. Don't think that I'm ignoring you guys. I got the notes right here. You can't see them, but I'm unable to display the notes and the Tapology screen at the same time. So that explains why everything is the way it is right now. So as it pertains to this matchup, we got obviously a UFC newcomer in Carlton Harris. He seems to excel as a grappler, very comfortable in the clinch, and just kind of taking guys down, looking to pass their guard and working to get a submission. He's pretty long and rangy for the division. As we can see here, he is 6 feet tall, 33 years of age. And just kind of like how I feel with a lot of these fighters coming from the regional scene, I just don't know exactly how good they are, because I just don't know how good the level of competition they've been facing is. So when it comes to Harris, I think he can win this fight. We have seen Aguilera struggle in terms of the defensive grappling, not just the Sean Brady fight, but there is even a lot of regional footage of Aguilera struggling quite a bit on the ground. I've seen him get his back taken multiple times. I've seen him nearly get submitted. I've seen him get taken down easily, just doesn't really sprawl for the takedown attempt. So even though I don't think Harris is a great wrestler, he gets a lot of his takedowns primarily in the clinch, from like body locks and trips and things like that. I think that if he closes the distance on Aguilera, he could probably take him down just based on the takedown defense that Aguilera has shown in the past. And again, I think he is live to get in a dominant position and potentially work for a submission. The other thing that we got to consider is I don't think either guy is a huge knockout threat, especially Harris. His striking is just pretty liable, I'd say. He's pretty wild and willing to brawl. He's also flat-footed in striking, flat-footed and plotting, in striking exchanges. He'll follow the opposition instead of cutting them off. So I think that Aguilera here is actually the better striker of the two. I think Aguilera could actually have a lot of success with his low kicks, chopping at Harris's leg, his lead leg. Because Harris does stand heavy on it, and he's just so kind of wild and sloppy. I think that there will be countering opportunities there for Aguilera. I actually do think Aguilera is a decent striker, but my concerns with him in striking exchanges is just his durability. He's been stopped via strikes more than once. I've seen him rocked in fights even where he didn't get finished, like his most recent regional loss. So that's always a concern for Aguilera, just kind of in general. I don't like to back fighters a lot where I question their durability. And, Aguilera hasn't shown bad cardio per se, but the durability is a concern that I have for him nonetheless. So I think it's, the striking exchanges will favor Aguilera. I just think he's more technical. I just think his punches are crisper and sharper. I think he's just got more layers to his striking game. And like I said, I think he can have success with the low kicks. And Harris here, he has been stopped via strikes once professionally, as we could see here in 2018. Aguilera seems to have some power in his punches. I wouldn't be surprised to see him get a knockout. But ultimately here, I do generally side with the fighters that I do think they should be able to control where the fight goes. And to me, that's Harris. Again, I don't think he's a great wrestler, but I don't think Aguilera is a great defensive wrestler either. Again, Harris has good top control. He'll look to pass the guard in top position. And then he will, look for a submission. And I do think that there's potential for him to get a submission, even though I don't think he's as talented as Sean Brady. But I do think there will be opportunities for him on the ground nonetheless. So pick is Harris, and the reason is because I think he's a better wrestler and grappler than Aguilera. So Carlton Harris is the pick. Next up, we have Tafon and Jukwee taking on Jung Young Park. We have, pull up the odds for reference. We have Jukwee sits as a slight favorite here. He currently sits at minus 140, looking at five dime, excuse me. The comeback on Park is plus 120. It's a tough fight to call just because Jukwee is very, very inexperienced. He's only been fighting pro MMA since 2019, as we could see here. I know that the guy is very experienced as a striker, but it's a whole other ball game to be, competing in the MMA octagon, on a consistent basis, getting a lot of rounds. And as we could see here, a lot of his fights have ended quickly. And again, I'm not doubting the guy or anything like that, but in terms of just like from a betting perspective, it's really tough for me to put a lot of conviction in a bet on a fighter that just hasn't been very tested, to be frank about it. He's only 5-0. That UFC debut was his first fight where he went the full distance, as we could see here. And again, I thought he looked good in everything. I liked his volume, his power, his technique offensively is good. He's got very good combinations, does Jukwee. He'll have a 4-inch reach advantage here over Park. He'll throw a jab. Again, power, punches to the body and head. I like how he mixes it up. He's also a Muay Thai. He has a lot of experience in Muay Thai and kickboxing. He's actually a world champion in kickboxing. Low kicks doesn't Jukwee have. And again, going back to that volume for reference, he did land 158 total strikes, not significant total strikes in that UFC debut against Pickett. My concerns for him, again, in addition to not being very tested, is just he stands very heavy on that lead leg. I do think that Park could have some success kicking it. Park has shown the willingness to do that in the past. And he actually did look hurt in his Contender Series fight, didn't Jukwee? He was actually getting outstruck by his opponent in the Contender Series, which was kind of my concern that I had for him in the debut against a longer Pickett, as we could see here. This is UFCstats.com, by the way. 55 significant strikes to 47. Again, I'm not saying or 47 rather. I'm not saying it's an atrocious performance by Jukwee, but I do generally have some questions about him. He looks very promising. But, also in terms of his defense, right, it kind of reminds me of Sadiq Youssef. Just the head movement could be much improved. He just kind of covers his head and moves side to side just slightly. The footwork could be much improved. It looked better in that UFC debut, but he's just pretty like plodding and striking exchanges generally as in Jukwee. We also saw him taken down by Pickett briefly in round one. I've seen him struggle to separate from the clinch against William Knight on the regional scene. And we even saw Pickett, going back to the head movement argument, land a long combo on him in round two. So he also looked to be hurt a couple times in that Contender Series fight. So he's one of these guys, I don't trust his striking defense right now. Can it improve in the meantime? It can. But it seems as though he's almost like relying a bit on his chin, kind of like Youssef was. And if you face a guy that could really threaten you with their power and has good technique, it could potentially be a problem. Even Youssef ran into that issue last time against Arnold Allen. Not to say the exact same thing will happen here, but it is something that's on the table, right? The thing that I like about Park in this matchup, he is much more experienced. He has not been fighting MMA since 2019. It's actually been since 2013. Granted, a lot of it has been on the regional scene. We've only seen him fight 3 times in the UFC. And, the last fight, again, we could say it was one-way traffic against Phillips, who, again, has shown massive defensive grappling flaws in his game. But, I do admire Park's willingness to get his game better, go for takedowns, and that will ultimately open up his window to winning fights more often. I'm not a big fan of Park's head movement. His head movement could also be much improved. He's fairly hittable, especially in round 3 against Barrio, where he slowed down. Both guys actually slowed down in their most recent fight. So, again, if a finish maybe doesn't happen within their first 12 and a half minutes or so, I wouldn't be surprised to see it go the full way, just based on the cardio dynamic. And even though Park goes for takedowns, he's still not a good wrestler. I mean, he shoots his takedowns from way far away, doesn't set them up. He just doesn't show good drive on his double legs. He'll have his hands underneath the hips, but won't exactly take the guy down. That shows me more of like a physicality difference, a technique difference. And again, he has shown the willingness to go there, but he doesn't come from like a strong wrestling background, anything like that. So even though I have my concerns about Jukwee from a defensive wrestling standpoint, he's going to be way bigger here than Park. Like physically, he's going to be 2 inches taller. I mentioned the 4-inch reach. So his physicality alone, I think, will give Park trouble. And that will make it seem as though, Park, the takedowns will come not so easy if he even gets them at all, right? And Park himself could be taken down. We saw him taken down easily by Anthony Hernandez. He has 45% takedown defense. So why I'm pointing that out is because, again, I admire Park's willingness to go for the takedowns, but I'm not ready to say that he's some elite grappler because he did what he did against Phillips. Again, it was nice that he took Barrio down a few times. Couldn't really control him, though. So I think we get this fight that's mainly won or lost in the stand-up. And again, I have my concerns for Jukwee, but I do favor him in a stand-up battle. In addition to the reach, he's more technical. He's got more variety as a striker, and he's a better clinch fighter, and he has more power. So it's again, a fight that is close for a reason. I think that Jukwee, I think both guys have upside. They have potential as fighters, but this is a good test, I think, for Jukwee to kind of a good measuring stick to see exactly where he's at. Because again, that UFC debut, he did well. People are high on him for a reason. Guy's a physical freak, comes from the striking background, like we talked about. But I like to see him tested a little bit more. So my pick is going to be Jukwee, but I expect a great effort from both guys here. Let me field a comment here. Got Rex in here. What's up, Rex? Let's go, AJ. What's up, brother? Thank you so much for the support. Let's do this, man. So, yeah, going back to this card, I mean, we got the third fight of the night, which is Ryan Benoit taking on Zaruk Adashev. So this is a flyweight fight between two guys that I think hit very, very hard, to be honest with you. When I watch these guys strike, they're hurting the opposition often, right? Benoit has several knockdowns in the UFC. He even knocked down Sergio Pettis. 8 of Benoit's 10 wins are by TKO KO. So even though this is the flyweight division where generally the finishes are just less frequent than, say, the higher weight classes, heavyweight, based on the power dynamic, these guys could both crack, right? I think they both excel as strikers. Adashev comes from the Glory kickboxing background. He's got a 16-3 kickboxing record. Does Adashev, he is also very credible in terms of like hand-to-hand combat achievements, but again, mainly a striker. He's aggressive and threatening. He could throw in combination. He's got good footwork. He'll circle to the weak side of the opposition rather than the power hand. He could switch stances on you. He mainly throws boxing combos and low kicks. He's got a fast 1-2 combo. He could counter well. He throws with power, as we mentioned, and he also throws hard leg kicks, which we also saw on full display. We also saw a much better effort from Adashev in his most recent fight against a much longer Sumiderji than we saw in that UFC debut, and that kind of makes sense, right? I don't want to be Mr. Hindsight all the time, right? But let's think about that UFC debut against Tyson Nam. I mean, he comes into that fight very short notice. He missed weight, and he just looked in much better physical shape for that second fight against Muderji, right? You could see his abdomen. He just looked really ripped and shredded. And as a result, it was a much better effort for him despite a loss because Nam knocked him out cold. And, That is still a bit of a concern I have for Adashev, not only the Nam knockout where he was knocked out cold, but he also did get rocked there in round 2 from a left hook counter by Muderji. So again, I'm not ready to say the guy's a chin issue yet, but we have seen him hurt already twice, and now he's facing another power puncher in Benoit. So it shouldn't be a huge surprise, I guess, in general, if Benoit's able to earn a knockout here just based on that dynamic, right? But I do think that generally Adashev is a solid striker. I went back and watched some of his Bellator fights. I mean, yeah, he got some groundwork done, but it's against competition that isn't near what he'll be facing in the UFC. I think he mainly wants to strike. I have seen him taken down, and I have seen him make some mistakes on the ground. Could have lost a scramble to a more physically imposing fighter, than say he did in those sequences that I was referring to. Just like in Jukwee, Adashev is also very inexperienced in MMA. Again, it's one thing to be experienced in kickboxing, but he's only 3-3 in MMA at the end of the day, right? It's just a different sport. So I have my concerns for him in terms of the inexperience, again, the knockout loss, the defensive wrestling. He could also be a bit wild in striking exchanges, can Adashev, but I also do have my concerns for Benoit. I mean, yeah, Benoit throws with power. He now is a BJJ brown belt. He's been training under Renzo Gracie in New York City. So I like to see the improvements out of Benoit. He's also a good scrambler as well. So if this fight, for whatever reason, goes to the ground, I would favor Benoit. I just think he's a better submission grappler and wrestler. Benoit does come from a wrestling background, three-time high school state champion in Texas is what my notes say. He actually showed a good reactive double leg against Tim Elliott in round 2. But going back to kind of the stats, Benoit doesn't really wrestle, right? If we're looking right here, 0.33 takedowns per 15 minutes over a fairly long UFC career, right? He landed 1 takedown against Sergio Pettis in 2015, and then I talked about the Elliott one. So Benoit's not exactly reliable to grapple. Maybe his camp sees that Adashev is mainly a striker, and they see him as a vulnerable opponent on the ground, and they may come in with a surprising game plan. But it's hard for me to put a lot of stock into that and into sort of, them assuming that they're going to come in with a wrestling game plan, right? I mean, if they do it, great, but it's not exactly something that I want to bank on. But even if he doesn't, I still think that Benoit could win on the feet. Again, he's got power. He's a switch stance striker, is Benoit, very capable. He's got fast hands, good combos, good dirty boxing. He's got an occasional low kick and high kick. But kind of like Adashev, his output is fairly low. And, he's been rocked in the past, right? He got hurt against Haile Alateng. He was hurt pretty badly there in the second round. I think he could have been finished if there was more time left on the clock, but that's neither here nor there. But he was also staggered back from a left hand from Ashkan Mokhtarian. So again, I know that officially Benoit has historically been tough to put away, but he still can be hurt nonetheless. And I do think that Adashev has some power. And then he's just, again, the low output, like non-wrestling style just makes me a bit nervous for him. Even though he is going to be my pick to win. Again, the guy that's much more experienced, obviously. Experience isn't everything in this game, but when it's such a big gap like it is here, again, Benoit just so much more tested at the UFC level than Adashev. And the fact that if it does hit the ground, I would favor Benoit. Again, higher BJJ practitioner. We talked about that brown belt under Renzo Gracie, New York City. Better wrestler, comes from the background. And I do think that he is the more durable fighter of the two. Even though I did point out that he can be rocked. So again, I'm not doubting Adashev. This is a competitive line for a reason. It may seem like it's kind of one-way traffic based on, maybe how I broke it down, but I really do believe it is a competitive fight. So that's the way I see it. So official prediction is going to be Ryan Benoit. I got another comment in here. Marcus, what's up, Marcus? Enjoying the breakdowns, Nubian Bookstart. Dude, I love you, Marcus. So Marcus, let me tell you guys about Marcus. So he recommended that I get a backdrop or something to, make a more visually appealing display. And I'm glad I finally jumped on it, man. So, and he kept asking me, AJ, I really want to help you out. And I really appreciate you, Marcus. Thank you so much. I love the support, brother. Next up, we got Mike Trisano and Ludoville Klein. I mean, this is a really, really anticipated one, right? I mean, how do you how do we not want to talk about Ludovic Klein after that UFC debut, right? That quick knockout in under 2 minutes against Shane Young, a guy that we knew prior to that fight had never been knocked out in pro MMA. And he was the guy that went 3 rounds with Volkanovski. And again, I know Volkanovski hasn't shown to be the biggest power puncher ever, but I mean, look, I mean, he went 3 rounds with the champ and Volkanovski, yet Ludovic Klein was able to knock him out in under 2 minutes. That's got to count for something, right? So I do think Klein is talented. I'm a big fan of his striking. I think he's very technical. He's a southpaw striker. He could counter well. He's got fast hands. He's got a front kick, a low kick, a high kick. He's got good range management, and he's mainly a single shot striker, I think, because he wants to manage range and avoid returning counters. So again, very technical, methodical, light on his feet, hard kicks when he throws them. And another thing I like about Klein is he's training at Sanford MMA ahead of this fight, which is a camp that a lot of people are high on, right? I mean, Phil Hawes trains there, who's on this card. Michael Chandler, Gilbert Burns, Derek Brunson. I mean, those are just a few of many names that train there. Vincente Luque, right? So I think that bodes well for him. And look, I mean, he's only 26, right? 26, very experienced, 17-2. I could see why people are high on him. I mean, again, I'm still a little not pessimistic, but I still would like to see a little bit more out of him. I mean, again, the knockout was so quick. It was very impressive, but I would like to see him maybe go 15 minutes just to see what he's like in a UFC octagon before maybe I say place a bet on him or something like that. But this could be a test where we see that. So getting more into Klein, I think he's a solid athlete. In terms of his grappling, I had to go back on his regional footage. Obviously, he's got an active guard from his back. He does have a body lock takedown when he wants to, but again, he doesn't really excel as a grappler. He's not a guy that, takes guys down consistently or recently at least and just passes their guard and looks for a finish. It's more so just he's throwing it in there to kind of change the pace. And again, he's mainly a striker, so he's looking to do that the vast majority of the time. And I do think that overall he does have good first layer takedown defense, this Klein. He should be able to keep this fight standing. I don't think Trisano has great grappling either that we'll get into, but Klein, in terms of his takedown defense specifically, he's got strong hips. And the times where I have seen him taken down, he gives the opposition a lot of resistance. He's not giving up easy takedowns by any means. So again, against a very capable wrestler and grappler, I'd have my concerns for Klein if he hasn't improved in the meantime. But this isn't really a matchup where, again, I don't think Trisano, we haven't seen him in about 2 years, so he could have improved in the meantime. But I really don't think, I would lean more often than not, we don't need to worry about that here. On the Klein side in terms of his takedown defense. But going along with that point, he doesn't really, I wouldn't say he's a strong offensive wrestler, and he could be taken down. He was taken down and controlled by Lucas Sajewski, former UFC fighter, in his most recent regional fight. And also just his pace that he fights at is fairly low. Again, that goes with the caveat of the opposition isn't really hitting him because, again, that range management is very good, likes to fight methodically, but that could be maybe his detriment in a lower output 3-round fight, is if the judges just favor the slightly more active fighter. But I don't know if that's going to bite him here. On the Trisano side, he's a Tiger Showman guy. So fighters that train there, Shane Burgos, Julio Arce, to name a few. I am high on that camp. Jimmy Rivera is another guy. And Trisano, I'd say he excels mainly as a striker. He's an orthodox striker. He likes to throw the low kick pretty frequently. If he keeps throwing him naked, I think that'll set up counter opportunities for Klein because he just won't really set him up. He'll just go a bit to the well often with them. And I get it in the matchups he did it in against Pena, who just wasn't checking them, wasn't countering them. But maybe against Klein, it bites him from a counter. Trisano himself does counter well. He has frequent jabs. He has solid boxing combos. He's got a good right hand, good head movement. And he could threaten a bit off his back with his submission attempts, right? But in terms of Trisano's cons, as my notes say, pros versus cons, again, 2-year layoff, I'd say that more falls in the neutral. Again, I prefer fighters to be active when they fight, but again, maybe in this meantime, he has improved. He's only 29, so a somewhat recent example where we saw a guy improve significantly around this age is Brian Ortega. I'm not saying Trisano's Brian Ortega by any means, but I'm just saying that we have evidence to suggest, like, hey, just because a guy took time off doesn't mean he can't come back a much better fighter. I think there is a chance that Trisano comes back as a better fighter. I think he probably does. He, too, is a moderate to low output striker. So I don't think he fits the prototype of like a higher pace striker that can maybe give Klein issues on the scorecards. Again, if it's that sort of pace that we talked about, sort of like, lackadaisical pace, maybe he just doesn't land the power strikes, but I don't think that's an issue here for Klein. And Trisano himself has shown defensive grappling weaknesses. He was taken down easily twice by Joe Giannetti, a guy no longer with the promotion. Again, all due respect to him, but I just didn't like the resistance that Trisano was giving him there. Just taken down fairly easily. Didn't fish for underhooks there. And again, I know that was in his UFC debut. And again, I'm sure he's improved in the meantime, but he was also taken down easily from a single leg by Luis Pena. He was also taken down easily several times by Grant Dawson, got back mounted. He was also back mounted by Pena as well. But in the Dawson fight, he was submitted there via rear naked choke. So Trisano is a guy who, again, I think he excels as a striker. So I don't think he'll be a fish out of water against Klein. But Klein seems to have that power because, again, Shane Young hadn't been knocked out prior to when he fought Klein, right? And we saw what happened there. So again, there's that, but let's just pretend like hypothetically Klein doesn't knock Trisano out, which I think is a very legitimate possibility. So if we have this fight that goes to the scorecards, I actually still would favor Klein. I think he's more technical. I think he's a more varied striker. I think he hits harder, and he's just been more active. Not in terms of like the punches that he throws, but just how frequently he's fighting, right? Again, Trisano, it's been 2 years. Klein has fought, let's just fact check myself, Tapology. So obviously he had that debut against Shane Young in 2020, but he also had another fight in 2020, one here in 2019, whereas Trisano, the last time we saw him fight was, I believe, May of 2019, whereas we've seen Klein here has actually fought 4 times since, right? So, I think activity is important. I do. I don't think it's the end all be all of a matchup, but Conor McGregor in his after he lost to Poirier was talking about how the activity could have really helped him. Paraphrasing there, but would have helped him to be more active, right? So again, I'm not doubting Trisano. I like him, but I actually do side with Louisville Klein here to get his hand raised again. Should be a fun scrap though. Next fight. We've got 5th fight of the night, Phil Hawes and Kyle Dawkis. Yeah. Okay, I'm really looking forward to this one. Really looking forward to this one. Let me peep the chat. No, we got no comments in here. Yeah, only a couple comments. Yeah, you guys feel free to leave a comment if you want. Just share your thoughts on the fight. Just have a good time in there. But yeah, I'll just be checking back and forth. So this matchup, right? So Dawkis and Hawes, right? So Hawes is a guy that, we kind of know that his cardio and his durability has hindered him a bit in the past. And that could be something that hinders him here yet again, right? The thing though is, Hawes, while he's fresh and while his durability holds up, I think he's a really solid fighter. I do. And I know that's a huge caveat because I always talk about how cardio and durability are very important, and they are, but I'm giving credit where credit is due, and Hawes does deserve a lot of credit, right? He is extremely physical and athletic for this weight class. I mean, just his last fight against Nasruddin Imavov, a guy who's, maybe not as physical as Hawes, but a reasonably good athlete. Hawes just held him in the clinch for several minutes there. Let's just look at the stats, right? So Phil Hawes held Nasruddin Imavov for over 11 minutes of control. Not all of it was in the clinch. Obviously sometimes, as we could see here, he took him down and got some top control, but that speaks volumes to me, at least, how physically imposing, Hawes could be. And again, like we talked about, he's another Stanford MMA guy, a camp that myself and others are high on, and we could count on them to at least come in with a good game plan, right? That the coaches will lay out a blueprint on what they want to do. It doesn't guarantee that the fighter's going to follow it to a T, but it's still nice to know that they're planning, right? And I do think that the clinch and the takedowns were part of Hawes's game plan last time against Imavov, because Imavov, as we saw, as he nearly knocked out Hawes, he almost had him out on his feet there in rounds 2 and 3, to close the distance, because Imavov was a threat there in open space, to close the distance, Hawes, and limit those exchanges in open space and just be the more physical guy in those exchanges, right? And not only is Hawes just, very physical and athletic from the eye test, but, he comes from a high-level wrestling background, right? Division I wrestling background. I do think he's a better wrestler here because, his opponent here, Dawkis, we've seen Dawkis put on his back. We've seen, on the regional scene, we saw Brandon Allen control him in top position. I mean, again, Brandon Allen's a very solid fighter, as we know, but I do think that there's potential here for Hawes to land some takedowns, considering he's a better athlete, comes from the higher pedigree, junior college national champion from Iowa, to be exact. He's got a good double leg, does Hawes. He's got the ability to chain wrestle, mat return ability, power body lock takedown. He's able to just get these guys down and hold them there because, again, not just the strength, but also he's a BJJ brown belt. He's got good wrist control in top position, heavy top control pressure with ground and pound. I'd say he's a positionally sound grappler, and he looks to take the back and get both hooks in. So these sort of things could be issues for Dawkis, who, again, I don't think is nearly as physical as Hawes. I think we'll see that at weigh-ins. Dawkis is more of like a long and rangy type guy. As we could see here, he's 6'3", very tall, obviously. But I do think that there is potential here for Hawes to push him up against the fence, land some takedowns, earn some top control. And, we've seen Dawkis, kind of struggle there, right? He was, again, back was taken on the regional footage. He struggled to separate from the clinch on the Contender Series against an opponent that was much smaller than him, was Dawkis. And in terms of like the durability angle of Hawes, I actually don't think he's as in trouble. What am I trying to say? He's at as big of a risk in this matchup to get knocked out than say he did in prior ones, because interesting stat, Dawkis actually has no wins by KO TKO, right? And again, I'm not saying he can't get a knockout, but he just historically has not shown to be a huge power puncher, right? So again, maybe Hawes is just so gassed that Dawkis is able to tee off on him, but I actually do think that Hawes is the better striker here, at least while fresh. I think he's more technical. I think he could have success with his low kicks. I think he hits harder. And that should help him win the aggregate of the striking exchanges, right? So I do understand the hesitancies with Hawes, and I am always hesitant to back guys that have shown shaky cardio and durability in the past more than once. But if I actually look at the matchup, I just think that Hawes has him beat pretty much everywhere. And I'm going to pick Hawes to win. I'm going to pick him to win by decision. Dawkis, as we know, is very tough. He's a high-level Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu practitioner. I don't think it's likely that Hawes finishes him on the ground. Maybe he can knock him out. I mean, we saw Brandon Allen, hurt Dawkis more than once in that fight. So that's a possibility. That would be how I think more likely Hawes gets it done inside the distance by TKO KO. But I'm just going to side with Hawes here. The reason being more athletic and physical, better wrestler, and I think he's more powerful, and I think he'll win the aggregate of the striking exchanges as well, at least while fresh. It's just a matter of at what point does that cardio start to slow down, if it does at all, and can Dawkis take over? So that's kind of what I think is relying on the Dawkis side, is to get to check the durability, wear Hawes out, make him work for the takedowns, and maybe win down the stretch. So I'm going to pick full Hawes to win. Next up, we've got Ben Rothwell taking on Felipe Lins. I mean, what could I say here, right? Just a fun matchup. I mean, this is as good as it gets, right, for a heavyweight fight. It's a tough fight to call, to be honest. I mean, on one hand, you have Ben Rothwell, who, let's just be honest here, since the USADA suspension, just has not looked like the same guy, right? He just has been looking very slow and just pretty lumbering in the cage. And he's just basically been stalking guys, getting them in the clinch, and just doing damage to them upon entry into the clinch or actually in the clinch. That's how big Ben has gotten his work done recently. He had success walking down OSP, forcing OSP to run, doing some damage in the clinch, threatened OSP with a choke early in that fight in round one. But he just the footwork is poor. I mean, he's just been so hittable and everything recently. I mean, he absorbed 150 significant strikes from Andrei Arlovsky in a 3-round fight. and then absorbed north of 150 in a 5-round fight from Junior Dos Santos. Granted, that was a while ago, and that was pre-USADA suspension. And now that he's 39, and again, Ben has generally shown to be durable throughout his career, still a very durable guy, but we've seen him get hurt more and more recently. We saw him hurt by OSP multiple times. Actually, OSP knocked him down with a head kick. We also saw him hurt briefly by Andrei Arlovsky. So I have my concerns for Rothwell, just in terms of just his regression and just how he's looked. I mean, I know he's gone like 2-3 on paper since returning from the USADA suspension, but like, let's actually look at those wins, right? I mean, against OSP, that was a split decision. I'm not taking anything away from the guy, but I mean, he hasn't exactly pulled away in these fights. And then even against Stefan Struve, right? He was debatably losing the Struve fight up until he hurt Struve, right? You know, there was the low blows in there, and there's a little bit of controversy still, but it's again, just it's tough to trust Rothwell just kind of in general. I'm not saying he can't win this fight, but he at this point is just mainly a guy where his threats are the fact that he is so durable and willing to walk forward, and that he has power. Again, he's not a great technical fighter. He hasn't shown to go out there and go for takedowns. He's a BJJ purple belt. So I think we get a fight that's won or lost standing, right? And on the feet, again, I think that Rothwell still has those advantages, durability and power, but I do think that Lins moves better. I think Lins has faster hands. The thing that concerns me about Lins, well, there's a few. One, he's a low output counter striker. He'll kind of attack in a flurry, but mainly he just boxes and throws low kicks. Like I said, he does have fast hands, so that can maybe cause Ben some fits. I also do think that Lins himself has a solid clinch game, but actually would slightly favor Rothwell there. I think he's a bit more physical. Trains an American top team, does Lins, BJJ black belt, but like we talked about, fight that's going to be won or lost standing in all likelihood. And then the other thing I got a concern about, in addition to Lins's output, is the durability angle, right? I mean, he's been stopped via strikes more than once. You know, the Tanner Boser fight. I mean, look, Tanner Boser was on a run, but he knocked him out cold. I think it's possible that Rothwell could do the same. You know, he was taken down by, hit cleanly rather by Josh Copeland, a fight that, again, it's so hard to gauge, the amount of success that Lins could have in this matchup against Rothwell, right? So again, not a great technical striker as Lins, rarely utilizes kicks, striking output is low, doesn't really look to wrestle. So there's only so much conviction I could have in a pick here, just considering the flaws of each guy. And the other thing is Lins just hasn't shown to have much punching power, right? You know, he went 3 rounds with Arlovsky, couldn't really hurt him. He hit Josh Copeland clean. That was the train of thought that I was trying to pick up on. He hit Josh Copeland clean in PFL several times, couldn't hurt him either. So again, it's speed and it's speed and fast hands, like speed in terms of actual movement, and fast hands versus durability and power on the Rothwell side, where I'm going to ever so slightly favor Rothwell. He's got those advantages. Plus, he's got the more proven UFC resume, right? I mean, Lins, again, my concerns with Rothwell in terms of the USADA suspension, but also Lins, since coming to the UFC, just his physique hasn't looked the same, just hasn't been performing at that same level. And I know it's the UFC versus PFL, but still, just the eye test doesn't exactly check out, right? So there's that. We've got main card fight, Amanda Ribas and Angela Hill. So really anticipated fight here, highly anticipated, and it's one that I do think that there's going to be some love for the dog, and I could totally get it. Angela Hill has been on a roll lately, right? I mean, she has 2 split decisions recently, but those were fights that she could have won, right? And there were 2, Claudia Gadelha and Michelle Waterson, not bad losses by any means. And, Amanda Ribas here has, she's done well, up until her most recent fight against Marina Rodriguez. And even in that fight, she did really well in round 1, took down Rodriguez, controlled her for the rest of the round, but then got caught with a counter right hand that buckled her legs bad, rocked her badly, and then Rodriguez was able to finish the fight with a standing TKO after dropping her. I bring this up because this wasn't the only time Ribas was stopped via strike. She was stopped on the regional scene by Pauliana Viana. And that was kind of my hesitancy in terms of backing Ribas in terms of a bet. against Rodriguez was because I did think that Rodriguez had the tools to kind of threaten her at standing. And I'm not trying to be like, bitter or anything like that about, passing or what have you, but I'm just trying to, just be fully transparent with my thought process there. And that's going to be a concern that I have for Ribas going forward against another capable striker, which I do think that Hill is, even though I don't think she's as dangerous as Marina. But what this fight boils down to me, and I even, had concerns about this with Ribas in the past, is just when we look at her resume, right? I mean, again, she's gone out there and done her thing, but she hasn't really faced fighters that are like legit threats standing to her, striking threats prior to the Rodriguez fight. Again, like she beat Mackenzie Dern, which was a win that aged very nicely. Don't get me wrong, but Mackenzie Dern has, I would argue, looked a lot better since that fight. She returned back from her maternity leave in that fight against Ribas. She just didn't look as fast or explosive there, just comparing that fight to her other ones. And again, if they were to run it back, I'm not doubting Ribas could win it again, but maybe the win looks a little bit better on paper than maybe I was initially giving it credit for. And then up until that, again, she took down Randa Marcos, who she was just a much better striker then, got the better of the striking exchanges there, took down Paige Van Zant, got a submission. And so while these two ladies are both standing, I actually wouldn't be surprised to see Hill best Ribas. I think they're both very good strikers, actually. I like both of their volume. They also have good technique. Hill does come from a, Muay Thai, or very experienced as a kickboxer, does Hill, according to her Wikipedia. She's technical. She's fluid as Hill. She could throw it. She could throw in combination. She could fight at a high pace. She's very light on her feet. And her takedown defense, people have gotten a lot of credit towards her for this, has gotten a lot better through the years. If we look at the Brandon Marcos fight, this is going back a ways. She was taken down and submitted by Marcos in the first round back in 2019. But since then, her takedown defense has looked improved, to be honest with you. She got taken down, obviously, by Xiaonan, but she was threatening Xiaonan from her back with a triangle choke. She's been working closely with Wilson Hayes, a former UFC fighter, a BJJ black belt. She's also just got a good work ethic. So I would imagine that that's the reason why she's improved in the meantime. Stuffed a lot of Claudia Gadelia's takedowns, stuffed the vast majority of Michelle Waterson's takedowns, 1 for 18. So I'm of the mindset that Hill has improved her takedown defense. As we could see here, she was taken down twice by Yoder, but the caveat with that is Yoder didn't really go in on a double leg and just dump her. Hill just kind of got a little overzealous, teeing off on Yoder, and then Yoder caught a kick and then dumped her. It wasn't like Yoder just got on her hips and then took her down. So again, I'm not taking any credit there, but I'm just to the point of, again, Hill's takedown defense. I do think generally it's solid. Ribas does come from a judo background. She does have solid takedown ability from the clinch, judo trip, body lock. She trains an American Top Team as well. And why I do favor Ribas here is because I do think that if this fight does hit the ground, she's just got a massive advantage. She's the fighter who's a BJJ black belt. She's slick at taking the back as Ribas. She's aggressive with her ground and pound from mounts. She's a proficient scrambler. And she's also a crafty submission specialist is Ribas. So again, this is a fight where if it stays standing, I do think it'll be competitive. I think they're both technical. I like both of their volume, that sort of thing. And also, I guess Hill's concerns in the past with the cardio in a 5-round fight aren't on the table here because this is only 3 rounds, obviously. So I think that Hill's cardio will hold up just fine. And I think she'll come out motivated here, right? So I think this will be a stout test for Ribas. But again, when we have a fight where I think it's a competitive striking match, even if I slightly favor Hill there, I think that Ribas has a more marginal advantage if they go to the ground. And that's why I favor Ribas. I also just like the angle on the Ribas side of just she's 9 years younger than Hill. And she's just a fighter much more likely to be making improvements of the two. Again, I think Hill's improving, but just based on, Ribas's experience and age, I think she'd be the fighter more likely to make those leaps and bounds improvements. So a tough test for both ladies, but I'm going to slightly lean with Amanda Ribas here. Next up, we got another fun one. and this is why I love this card, guys. Like, I mean, again, it's not a pay-per-view, but like we got a lot of exciting fights, and this fight is no different. Diego Ferreira and Gregor Gillespie, right? So very, very interesting fight. A much different matchup for Gillespie than the Brad Riddell fight was. I had a bet on him there, and I even though I had a bet on him, there was a way that he could have lost. Again, he was coming off his first knockout loss. We know Brad's so much better of a striker than him, technically. But like, this is an interesting fight because with Diego, he is a third-degree BJJ black belt. He's got a very dangerous guard as Diego. He could scramble well while he's fresh, and he's a very good submission threat, as you could tell from that pedigree in all likelihood. And so I still do think Gillespie will want to land takedowns here, but there's maybe a chance that, he won't be able to pass Diego's guard easily, at least while fresh. And B, he just, is maybe a little tentative to shoot them. Maybe he just doesn't shoot them with as much urgency or something like that, knowing Diego's accomplishments and things like that. Again, we have seen Gregor go out there and dominate solid submission grapplers on the ground. Vince Pichel to name one, Glyco França way back in his UFC debut, but Diego will welcome that, I think, a bit. And so it's interesting because if it stays standing, I think it could be pretty close, to be totally frank with you. Like Diego, he could switch stances. He's got a bit of a reach. He could fight at a high pace. He does have some pop in his hands as well. He hurt Beneil Dariush in the second fight. He also hurt Jared Gordon and Ramsey Ninjum. So he's not a huge power puncher, but just considering how hittable Gregor could be, his head movement could be much improved. Again, the Kevin Lee knockout loss, obviously, but besides that, he was also rocked by Jason Gonzalez. He went to a knee there, and then also rocked by Glyco França, in part just because he doesn't move his head off the center line, and he's willing to recklessly brawl. I do think it's gotten better in the meantime. I do think that he has a better understanding of range management and footwork since those fights, but I still wouldn't say Gillespie's like a power striker. And again, he is one of these guys that's coming in on a layoff. I wouldn't be surprised if, he just comes in a better version of himself, but I still do. The tape still gives me pause with his striking tendencies. But why I guess I wouldn't be surprised to see him maybe best Diego on the feet is I just think that Gregor moves much better. I think he's a much better athlete. Diego just has this tendency of he doesn't really particularly move very fast as Diego. He does a lot of like covering up, and he's just so hittable and everything. He's 36 years of age. And so that kind of gives me concerns for Diego standing. Like, I think either guy is live to get a standing KO here, to be honest with you. They both have some pop, not the most dangerous strikers, not the most technical, certainly. But I wouldn't be surprised if a brawl ensues because, they're both willing to brawl. We saw Diego do that against Beneil Dariush last time out. And Gregor, we've seen him do that plenty of times in the past. But, and either guy is live to just get a knockout there because they're just, so hittable and everything, and they both could be hurt. But I do think that Gregor has the better cardio, just assuming we're getting the best, near the best version of him. He could just shoot takedown after takedown. Could Gregor, nonstop for 15 minutes. Great guard passer. He'll pass the guard in top position. He'll look for mounts, and he'll look for the arm triangle in normal mounts. But from back mount, he'll look to sink in the hooks and just land a bunch of ground and pounds. So I think while fresh, Diego's guard will be tough to pass. But as the fight kind of wears on, I wouldn't be surprised to see Gregor maybe just be a little bit too much for him. And it's not just a matter of like, Gregor's a blue belt and Diego's a third-degree black belt, therefore he can't do anything. I mean, if Diego gets to a certain point in his cardio where he's just completely gassed, kind of like how he was his last time against Dariush when they were fighting at a higher tempo, it's not a matter of what your belt rank is. It could just be who's just much fresher and much more dominant in top position. And Gregor, despite being a BJJ blue belt, we talk about his capabilities, but he is a great wrestler, NCAA Division I wrestling national champion. It's been well documented at this point, but Jordan Burroughs was the guy that was one above him, right? Jordan Burroughs, if you're not already aware, is just a stud of a wrestler. Could be the best of all time. So again, that just speaks to how great Gregor is as a wrestler, right? He's just relentless with the takedowns. He could shoot takedown after takedown. And it's just tough to get him off you once he has his hands clasped against the clinch. So I think it's a very stout test for Gregor. I consider Diego a very live underdog just based on the stylistic dynamic of third-degree black belt. I think he's live in a striking battle. Got reach, got volume. He could switch stances, but I just think that Gillespie's going to be a lot faster than him. I think he's got much better cardio. I think he's a better wrestler, and that should help him win. I just trust those advantages a bit more than the advantages that Diego has, just the activity advantage, the volume advantage when they're actually fighting, in the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu advantage. So, again, like we talked about earlier, I tend to side with the fighter that on paper should be able to control where the fight goes, and that to me is Gregor Gillespie. So he's going to be my pick to win, my prediction. All right. Another fun one. We got Maurice Greene taking on Marcos Rogerio de Lima to, I think, to round out our heavyweight fights. Let's just double check. Yep, round out our heavyweight fights. So interesting fight, to say the least. So Marcos Rogerio de Lima is a guy that he kind of has one consistent MO. Like, he'll go out there, he'll look to throw heavy strikes and brawl recklessly, not a very technical fighter everywhere. And if he knocks the guy out in the first round, that's great. That's usually how he wins fights. But if he's unsuccessful, he tends to gas, he tends to get taken down, and he tends to get submitted quickly. I would point somebody to the Stefan Struve fight if you don't know what I'm talking about. And we're going to talk about it here anyway. I mean, he just blasted Struve with a big shot, just a big looping shot that nearly knocked Struve out. I mean, Struve was saying in his post-fight interview that he didn't recall what happened, and De Lima was able to take him down and just, or rather stay on top of him, top control for the rest of the round, and just kind of beat Struve up, get around 5 minutes or so of top control. But then the following round, Struve, who is very tall, not known as a good wrestler, was able to take De Lima down from a trip, pass the guard into mount, and then earn an arm triangle choke stoppage. De Lima is a BJJ black belt on paper, but all five of his UFC losses have been by submission. So again, it could happen like in any matchup, right? Just when you weather that storm against this guy, he tends to, he doesn't really react well to the submission threat. We saw that in just his last fight against Alexander Romanov with the, very famous that evening forearm choke. And it's still very famous to this day, right? Because it's just so rare. How often do we see that? So, but I say all these issues with De Lima, again, the defensive grappling, defensive wrestling, the cardio is poor, but he could still win this fight. I mean, Greene has issues too. Greene defends takedowns at a rate of 28%. He's a low output striker. He's very long and rangy for the weight classes, Greene. He's 6'7". He'll have a 5-inch reach. He's a more varied striker here. He has those patented Jackson Wink oblique kicks because he's been training there. He doesn't do a great job, though, of fighting long, fighting tall. He doesn't really stick a jab out there all that often. And just his ability to close distance isn't ideal, or excuse me, to keep distance isn't ideal. John Vellante fight was the perfect example of that. His cardio failed him a bit, so did his range management, and by round 2, he slowed down against Vellante, and about halfway through, Vellante was able to close distance on him with frequency, land a lot of overhands, and by round 3, he was really struggling to control range, and Vellante was able to hit him with a counter strike that nearly knocked Greene out, to the point where the ref was telling him to fight back. Like, it was almost over. And so, yeah, that wasn't the only fight, though, where Greene was hurt. He was rocked by Junior Albini because he doesn't move his head off the center line, just got a little reckless after hurting Albini, and Albini almost knocked him out. 45% striking defense if you're a stats guy, 4.37 significant strikes per minute. He's just willing to trade punches. So his pocket defense in general is just a liability, is Greene. And just like in addition to the Vellante fight where he got hurt, he was also hurt by Junior Albini, like we talked about, Juan Espino, Sergey Pavlovich, and Greg Hardy. I mean, Greg Hardy hurt him at least once in that fight and finished the fight in round 2. So I have concerns on both sides. I think they're both got a lot of things that they could really tighten up in their game. But I'm actually going to side with the fighter that I think has less holes. And that to me is the Lima. And I just think he's more durable of the two, much more durable. DeLima has never been knocked down in the UFC one time. As we can see here, he's inflicted a lot of damage. He's landed a lot of knockdowns, but he's actually never been knocked down himself. And Greene has just been hurt so often. Right. So again, I'm not saying Greene can't hurt DeLima because again, DeLima is just so flawed defensively, which is just wild brawling style. But DeLima has shown the better chin. And even though he hasn't looked for takedowns like with much frequency, he probably could get him if he wants Greene down because Greene just has poor takedown defense. But if DeLima ends up in top position, he might be at risk of getting guard subbed. Greene has been training jiu-jitsu for like 10 or so years. He's a BJJ blue belt, but we have seen in the past in the Volante fight in his UFC debut against Batista, he does have an active guard from his back. So just based on, DeLima's history, I wouldn't be surprised to see Greene submit him, to be honest with you, from guard even. So that's what it boils down to me. I just think that DeLima is the bigger finishing threat here early. He's more durable, more dangerous standing, I'd say, and he's a more physical fighter. So again, it's a hesitant pick, but I'm going to side with Marco Sogeri DeLima to get his hand raised nonetheless. We've got Neal Magni taking on Jeff Neal. I'm just going to peep the chat real quick. I got another comment in here. What is up, whoever you are? I haven't gotten to you yet. It is Notorious. Notorious, what's up, Peter? Under 2.5 at plus 170 was crazy value. Oh, man, I wish I saw this comment earlier. I don't know what fight you're talking about. You sent that at 518, so that was probably what fight was that? Oh, Gillespie and Ferreira, maybe? That's got to be it, right? Yeah, if you got that line, man, because it's moved. I mean, good for you if you're happy with it. I mean, yeah, because we're talking, yeah, it's definitely came in a bit on some books. So, yeah, kudos to you and anybody that jumped on it. Yeah, I'm gonna be definitely checking back in here with the chat here. Thank you guys so much for your support and best of luck to my friend Peter. So we're back here and we are back with Magni and Neal, right? Jeff Neal and Neal Magni. So this is a fight where I think it's going to be win or loss standing in all likelihood. I generally think Neal has good takedown defense. We haven't seen it tested a lot, but the glimpses we've seen have looked pretty good. Jeff Neal, that is. He's a strong athlete. He's very fast. He comes from a football background, so that's part of the reason why he's just so excellent in those areas. And he stuffed a lot of Bilal Muhammad's takedowns. And I know Muhammad isn't like an elite wrestler. He's not like, he doesn't come from like an NCAA Division I wrestling background, anything like that. But pretty solid wrestler is Muhammad. That gives me confidence that Neal has some pretty solid takedown defense. And again, in part, he's good technically, but also just he's so strong and everything. And he's tough to track down. He's just very light on his feet as Neal. And he's just a tough guy to chase for that reason. So Magni is so long and rangy. Maybe he mixes in some clinch control here. Maybe he can take Neal down and just impose his length. Maybe he takes the back or something like that. But I think that Neal will do a decent job of scrambling back to his feet. And in the stand-up battle, I just like Neal a bit more. I know that Magni's got the reach. Magni's got 5 inches of reach to be exact. He will utilize it well out of either stance. He, pops a jab. He'll try and control the lead hat of the opposition. He utilizes low kicks. And, even in the clinch, not just in open space, just being the longer guy, he's just kind of able to impose himself on a lot of these guys. But when these two are standing, going back to that, I have to favor Neal. I just think he's more dangerous, more technical. I think he's got the sharper hands, like the better boxing in terms of his combinations and just the variety with them and just their overall like cleanness. Neal's mainly a headhunter, but I don't think I think he still can land on Magni with frequency. The hands are sharper. I just think he'll be able to close that distance, impose his power. He's got 5 knockdowns in 6 UFC fights as Neal. So I think he'll be able to push Magni back. We have seen Magni in past fights be kind of accepting of the back foot. like against Lorenz Larkin, for instance, Santiago Ponzinibbio. I don't think Neal will chop his legs down like those guys did, but again, force him back, just being the better technical striker with better footwork and superior power, should have success. And I know that Magni's only been stopped via strikes twice professionally against Larkin and Ponzinibbio, but I saw on tape he was hurt by Li Jingliang. He was also hurt by Tony Martin, and he was also KO'd on the Ultimate Fighter. So I think it's reasonable that Neal could, Jeff Neal, that is, it's so awkward, like with both of their names being Neal, but Jeff Neal could get a knockout here. It wouldn't surprise me. It really wouldn't. So, again, I'm not doubting Magni. He's a stout test for anybody. We've seen him go on a run recently. I know he's coming off a main event loss to Chiesa, but Neal seems unlikely to just take down Magni and just dominate him with top control like Chiesa did. But I'm going to side with Jeff Neal here. I think he's the better striker in a fight that's going to be won or lost standing. Co-main event, Donald Cerrone and Alex Morono. This was recently announced, right? Morono is stepping in for Diego Sanchez. We do have odds out for it, and let me show you those right now. We've got Donald Cerrone minus 175 on 5 dimes. The comeback on Morono is plus 155. To me, it's pretty clear on tape who the better fighter is. Like, Cerrone is just the more varied and craftier striker. I like his just willingness to throw strikes on the break with frequency. He'll always just like kind of sneak them in. Just good breakaway strikes in general does Cerrone have. I like his varied combinations. Just very experienced as a striker is Cerrone. He'll pop the jab. We know this by now with Cerrone, former title challenger, BJJ black belt. He's got a good reactive takedown. Still to this day, a pretty solid reactive takedown. But the thing is with Cerrone is he's now 38. He's on a losing skid. And it's tough to gauge exactly where he's at, right? I know we could see here he won a grappling bout against Dos Anjos in the meantime, but I'm talking about strictly MMA here. He doesn't look as fast or explosive to me as he did, say, in his prime. And it makes sense, right? He's just been fighting for so long. And like we talked about, 38 years of age on a losing skid here. And I know that, debatably he beat Pettis. And I know that this is that's as good as it gets right there for lightweights. And then the Nico Price fight, right? I mean, Nico Price landed 150 significant strikes on Cerrone, which is a bit of a concern. It just goes back to my point of I don't think he moves as well. I just think he's more hittable. I mean, it was encouraging to see his durability hold up there, but against a volume boxer like Morono, who's shown to land at a high rate in the past, 4.96 significant strikes per minute, for instance, I wouldn't be surprised to see Morono land with more frequency than, say, he did against Pettis. I mean, Pettis is just he just moves much better. He's more athletic. And I know that we just saw Pettis just get, volumed up basically by Collard, but just a different matchup. You get what I mean? He just moves much better in general while he's fresh, at least, and not pressured. But getting back to Morono here, I think that Cerrone's got the more varied tools on the feet. I think he's a better wrestler. They're both BJJ black belts, so I wouldn't expect either guy to really dominate on the ground. I mean, I admire Morono's aggressiveness from back mount. He has aggressive ground and pound there. He's also a submission threat. In standing, his boxing is fairly clean. He moves fairly well, but he's not like the most athletic guy. Going back to like the groundwork, he's proficient in scrambles. Very composed, effective ground and pound, win in dominant position. He has some power in his hands, but he's not the most dangerous guy. Concerns I have for Morono, just like Cerrone, head movement could be much improved. He pretty much relies on his distance management and movement for defense. He rarely throws in combinations. He's not a good offensive wrestler. He's pretty wild and sloppy in the pocket. And I do think that his durability is liable against a big hitter. We saw him knocked out by Nico Price, Chaos Williams, Da Silva. He was also hurt badly by Max Griffin, and perhaps Kenan Song as well. So I understand the odds being competitive. On paper, Cerrone's the better fighter, in my opinion. He's just the better striker because he's more varied. He's more technical. He's also the better wrestler, in my opinion, with his just more willingness to wrestle, just better reactive takedowns. And he's also much more proven. But like we talked about, Morono's just way younger. As we can see here, he's born in 1990, whereas Cerrone was born in 1983. But then also just the fact that Cerrone has just fought more times, just taken more damage. And like I said, I do think that he has looked a bit slower, which, I'm not happy to say that, just being honest here. But that's what it comes down to, right? Again, I think Morono's live. I think he can win. He does throw volume, and we have seen Cerrone take a lot of volume. And as recently as his last fight by Price, who's shown more willingness to throw volume in his last 2 fights, but not a huge volume guy in general. So I wouldn't be surprised to see Morono have some moderate to high success landing some head strikes here. So I'm going to pick Donald Cerrone to win because I tend to side with the fighter that I think is better over 15 minutes, has better round winning tools, and I think Cerrone does. We'll see how things shake out. I hope it's a good effort from both guys. I think it will be, and we'll see how it unfolds. Main event time. We are there. 12 fights. I want to thank everybody in the chat for sticking with me this whole time. All 12 of you. Thank you. Love you guys. Main event. Rodriguez in Waterson. Interesting, right? And I get it. Kind of like in terms of like the betting odds. Let me just pull it up so you know what I'm talking about. Rodriguez a 2-1 favorite, right? And that's kind of people are kind of wondering, like, the line, maybe it's inflated coming off a knockout loss or a knockout win rather, Rodriguez. And, she just beat Amanda Ribas, who prior to the fight was riding on a ton of momentum. And kind of like Louisville Klein and just kind of fighters in general coming off impressive stoppage victories. We tend to see them get high betting odds. And we've talked about this in the past with like Joaquin Buckley, for instance. I mean, debut against Kevin Holland, he was a big underdog, and Holland went out there, did his thing, but then against Impa Kasanganay is a fairly big underdog. Joaquin got that crazy spinning back kick knockout, and then he was like a 2-1 or so favorite over Wright, maybe more, which again was justified in the end, most likely. But then an over 3-1 favorite against Alessio Di Chirico, who had way more experience than Wright. It just was more durable than Wright, just a better fighter than Wright. Yet Buckley was coming off another knockout, so perhaps that is the reason why his odds were so high. And it's not like the odds makers don't necessarily just want to put out a line where like it's just in terms of like who they think wins by how much, but it's also a line to get action on both sides. And it makes sense why Buckley was so high is because the public was, big on him, right? He's coming off 2 crazy knockouts and people love knockouts, right? It almost makes us think that like the guy's just going to go on a knockout streak up until the title shot, when like it doesn't always happen like that. And I need to remind myself like that sometimes too. So it's just like the brutal, honest truth of this game. Knockouts are great, don't get me wrong, but when I analyze fights, I don't always act as if the knockout is the end all be all to my analysis. I think it's important to discuss, but I like to look at everything, right? So with that said, main event time, Marina Rodriguez and Michelle Waterson. And as we'll get into, I think Marina still can win by knockout because jumping into the first point, I think she is the better striker than Michelle here. I think it's not a massive blowout, but, Marina operates out of the orthodox stance. She's the longer fighter here. She'll have a bit of a reach. She'll be a bit taller than Michelle. I think she's more technical than her. And I think she throws with more power than Michelle. So I actually do think that the aggregate of the striking exchange will favor Rodriguez for those reasons. Michelle is very good in terms of like her kicks on the outside. She's a black belt in freestyle karate. She could switch stances on you, Michelle. She jabbed with frequency in that last fight against Hill, which I love to see. She just basically wants to keep range, utilize feints, and throw karate-based kicks, does Michelle. So as a result, she's generally competitive with a lot of strikers just because she's at a distance where she's hitting the opposition, but they're not always hitting her back with, the exact same frequency at times. Again, very striking for both ladies. I think Michelle's a bit more varied of the two, but Marina, she'll utilize kicks in open space, low kick, occasional head kick. Good footwork does Marina. She'll circle to the weak side of the opposition rather than circling to their power hand. She's also very good in the clinch is Marina. And also to add to the kick, she's also got a front kick. So front kick, low kick, occasional head kick. But in the clinch, she does a lot of damage. Elbows, knees. She's got that Muay Thai background, right? So she's very good with her control, like just controlling the opposition's head and just landing that damage, right? She hurt Cynthia Calvillo in that fight. Obviously, we talked about Amanda Ribas. That was an open space from a left counter. But in the clinch, she actually hurt Calvillo. She knocked down Aguilar. So Jessica Aguilar, that is. So Marina in open space and in the clinch is a threat. She really is. And I do think that she will win the striking exchanges here by an okay margin. I don't know if I'd favor her significantly, but I do favor her there nonetheless. But like we talked about, Michelle can make it competitive. She's a good striker herself, good technique, good variety, good distance management, very tested, obviously, been 5 rounds. But where Michelle, I think, will need to try to, win this fight as a path of least resistance is through the takedown. Michelle mainly came to the UFC as a fighter who would go for those head and arm throws, which, as we know by now, are just very ineffective because all the opposition has to do is just poke their head right out, and then they have their back. But recently, she's shown me at least improved takedown technique. She showed good double leg takedowns against Joanna Jędrzejczyk, a fighter that's historically been tough to take down. She's shown good scrambling ability to take the back. There was a sequence there in the Joanna fight where she took her back and got both hooks in. Who's really been able to do that against Joanna? Not many. She's got a single leg takedown, does Michelle, good reactive takedown, ability to chain wrestle, judo throw. So, again, am I ready to say like she's the best wrestler in the division? No, I think that goes to Tatiana Suarez, but I like the improvements nonetheless. I do. She's solid in top position, not the most, damage inflicting as evidenced by the Angela Hill fight. Basically just took Hill down in round 3, couldn't mount much offense because she was prioritizing controlling Hill down because Hill was doing a decent job of working back to her feet. But in general, she is pretty good as a top control grappler as Michelle. She's a BJJ brown belt. She was actually just rewarded that after her last fight against Angela Hill. And she's got solid control in top position. I don't think she'll be a huge threat to submit Marina. Marina's guard is, not easy to pass, but not, super difficult either. She's generally good at reclaiming guard, does Marina. BJJ purple belt. She's actually got a lot of no-gi Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu experience, does Rodriguez. And she actually generally does a good job of limiting damage from the bottom position. I know we saw her mounted in that UFC debut against Randa Marcos. She also took a lot of ground and pound, nearly finished by Cynthia Calvillo. But I would argue in recent fights it's gotten better. She's another fighter who's kind of an anomaly. She started MMA later on than most fighters, and she's actually made significant improvements. She must just be a really good learner and a hard worker. That's what I would assume it's attributed to. But we saw even in the Ribas fight, like Ribas couldn't really mount much offense on her, couldn't pass her guard. It was only round 1, but it still showed me an improvement nonetheless. And Carla Esparza too. I know Carla's pretty content to lay in guard, but it was good to see her just, again, not take too much damage and be competitive there. But my issue with Rodriguez, and it's kind of been, her weakness, to put it bluntly, in her game, because I really do think that she could strike with the best of them in this weight class. I really do. Is just her scrambling ability from her back. Literally every time she's been taken down, she's been pretty much controlled. I mentioned the Ribas fight. Ribas took her down, controlled her for the rest of the round. She couldn't get up in rounds 1 and 2 against Esparza. Even in round 3 against Esparza, she got up there eventually. Esparza went for leg locks. I don't know why towards the end of the rounds. And Esparza also kind of like let her up in some sequences. But when Esparza actually wanted to prioritize control, she actually kept Marina down. I mentioned the Marcos fight where she was mounted, controlled for over 3 minutes there, mounted briefly by Cynthia Calvillo in round 1 in addition to round 3. So that has been something that has kind of hindered Marina. And again, she's only lost once, but those have been the reason for her 2 draws. She won 2 10-9 rounds against Marcos and Calvillo, but lost a 10-8 round because she couldn't get off her back and then took enough damage, enough control to warrant a 10-8 round, right? So that is, something that I think we can see improve out of her. I think she has decent first layer takedown defense. She does have a sprawl. She's not easy to take down. But again, once you actually put her down, that's where she could be controlled. That's where she can maybe lose rounds. That's where Michelle, as it pertains to this matchup, can have success winning rounds that way. So as it pertains to prediction, I favor Marina ever so slightly. I think that standing, I think she's got more finishing upside of the two in general. And I just think that standing, she'll be able to have success landing damage with her just better technique, being longer. And it'll just come down to, how competitive Michelle makes the striking exchanges and how often she lands those takedowns and get that top control. So this is a fight where the underdog has a clear path to victory, despite the odds being fairly wide. But I'm going to ever so slightly lean with Marina. I don't have a problem with people thinking that the odds should be more competitive. That's a fair statement to make. Perhaps Marina's being a bit overrated from the Ribas knockout, but there's also still a chance that she's just getting a lot better. That is something that I think is legitimately possible, just considering how she just picked up the sport relatively recently and has learned a lot, gained a lot of experience, learned a lot of lessons. So Michelle's very tested. Main event last time out against Hill where she had a good showing. I know some people scored it for Hill, but regardless, it was a good fight all around. So pick is going to be Marina Rodriguez to win. So I'll just run through the picks really quick, just so you guys know. So from top to bottom, Marina Rodriguez, Donald Cerrone, Jeff Neal, Marcos Rogerio de Lima, Gregor Gillespie, Amanda Ribas, Ben Rothwell, Phil Hawes, Ludovic Klein, Ryan Benoit, Tefan and Jukwee, and Carlton Harris. Thank you guys so much for the prediction, sticking in the chat rather. It was awesome doing with this again live. Let me guys know what you think of the new setup. Of anything you liked about this video, feel free to hit the like button, hit the subscribe button if you haven't already, and leave a nice comment if you do so choose. And I want to wish everybody the best of luck on the event, and have a good day.